Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome back, legends, to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Today, we've got our favourite guest on, and that is our father, Nick Doumtsis. So after a couple of weeks of success personally, getting a really good red stag and also a hog deer, Dad's been here behind the scenes hunting as well. So we thought we'd better get him on to share a couple of stories with you guys, some highlights and some memories whilst hog deer hunting, and also recently searching for a red stag of his own. And then we're also going to jump into a few FAQs, listener questions as always. So if you have any questions you want answered on the podcast, please send us an email at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, or send us a message on Instagram to Twin Elements, Aidan Doumtsis Outdoors, or James Doumtsis Outdoors, and we'll answer it on a future podcast. But let's jump in.
Are you in the market for serious boots for all feet, terrain and adventures? Well, look no further than Lower Boots. We have been running the Lower GTX 3s for many, many years now. I've lost count of how many years and adventures we've had these boots without so much as a blister. They are flexible enough while still being supportive. I run them across multiple land types, whether it's in the Northern Territory floodplains, the mountains of Montana, or the basalt wall country in North Queensland, Australia. The team at Lower have extended their generosity to you, our valued listeners, and supplied us with a unique discount code. Head to their website and let them know we sent you. Use code TWINELEMENTS10 at checkout for 10% off your next order. If you're like me and enjoy trying things before you buy, then head in store to Venture Hunting. They have their Springwood Megastore as well as their smaller store in Hamilton, Victoria. Enjoy the benefits of trying before you buy and get the perfect fit. Wear Lowers on your next hunt. Your feet will thank you for it.
So let's jump back to the start of April, where Aidan, Dad and I were down in Gippsland, Victoria, chasing hog deer. If you haven't heard the part 1 and part 2 series of Aidan and I, when we were driving back up to New South Wales, we went in depth about our experience, but we also had Dad there in camp, and he left a couple of days early, so we couldn't get him on to talk about his experiences. But he was also had a bit of a different hunt in the sense that we were hunting private property whilst Dad was hunting public land. So we just wanted to get him in here to sort of complete the picture, I guess, for you guys and show the different options that you've got, in Gippsland, in Victoria. It's probably one of the only hunts like in the US where we've sort of got public land that you can hunt on. I mean, I know there is plenty of stuff in New South Wales as well. But yeah, just wanted to get his thoughts and insights. So please, Dad, tell us about your experience in public land hunting hog deer.
Hello, Jamie. How are you going?
Good, mate.
Very good. Well, 1st of April, I was there with you guys and I had scouted the area, I think, the same time after Belle's wedding. So we come out, way before the season. I think it was early Feb.
Yep, early February.
And there wasn't a lot of sign. At that point, I think they had some pretty heavy showers and I was keen to get out and check the area that I was hunting. I was, for the record, I was hunting out of a tree with a ladder there, and it was more as a view vantage point over a particular area. I mean, anyone hunting hog deer know that they love those sort of coastal areas close to water, very thick cover, tea tree, blackberries. There's a lot of cane grass, so it was very, very hard to get a gauge on what was actually there. But what I did do, I walked the perimeter of this area that had a sort of track through it. And all I picked up was one stag print, a hind and a small fawn. And that was it. So it wasn't really encouraging. Didn't get to see any deer, although I did stay, I think I was there for 2 days. And one day I spent in the tree looking around, just getting my bearings, which way the wind's coming, made some notes, took some photos of particular trees that I can use as vantage points. But yeah, it was exciting, but it was very hard. Unfortunately, public land is so much different to private. You've got, I think, the 16th of March, you got the start of in Victoria, the duck hunting season. That puts a lot of pressure on. I mean, most hog deer are mainly nocturnal anyway, so once those gunshots go off, they tend to just, go very quiet. So it was, 1st of April come around, and it was very exciting. Nothing compared to you guys, but it was good.
I think the biggest thing to note that was different every day coming back to sort of hunting camp, I guess, was the comparison in sort of the pressure of the deer, I guess. Like from what you were saying, you might see, if you were lucky, maybe one deer a day. If not most days, you wouldn't even see a deer. Whereas we were seeing plenty of deer in our little sort of parcel of private, I guess. And even in the middle of the day, they'd come out and sun themselves. And if the weather was nice and it wasn't too windy, and we'd see plenty of deer just going about their natural behavior because they weren't getting that pressure. Whereas for you, it was, a completely different story.
Yeah, I think for me, I was there for 7 days, and I saw 9 individual animals that I can recall. One of them was by accident. I remember it was the first or second morning. It was now 1 o'clock, and to be honest, I just wanted to go home for a feed because I really got up early. I think it was about 4:30. You guys were having breakfast, and I thought, no, first day I got to get in, and I wasn't prepared really. Unfortunately, I just skimmed breakfast, and when I got to the tree stand, I was there, and I saw, I think, a hind and a very small fawn, and that was really amazing to see how I was watching her for most of the day. And about 11 o'clock, I watched her come in early in the morning. As that sun was coming up, I can see where she was coming from, but she went into thicker cover. Now, we're hunting an area where it's mainly sort of very heavy couch grass sort of thing, overgrown with a lot of reedy stuff. So if you're thinking of walking through, it's about chest height, and you can't see anything really, especially a hog deer that doesn't stand too high. But I was elevated quite high, and I was looking down, had my binoculars, and I can see that she bedded in this particular area, and every now and again I'd skim by and have a look. And I think it was around 11 o'clock I caught her getting up and sort of almost like a dog or a cat, once they've been disturbed in their bed, doing a bit of a rotation to catch the sun or maybe get out of the wind, I don't know. But that particular day, 1 o'clock, I'm thinking I'm going to go home for a quick lunch break. And as I was climbing down the ladder, I saw this old stag must have been old because both his coronets were very much joined, and he formed a V. But I don't know if he had velvet that he didn't strip, but both antlers, I think his left antler had a little bit of bone, but the other one looked like a melted candle. It was just a weird old head. He didn't look like he was in good condition, and I dare say he probably wouldn't even see out this season because, he just looked like an old deer. But yeah, exciting. I did get to see a few deer, one good stag, but it was very, very long days, long hours.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, that paints a very promising picture, I guess, even in public land hunting. Like there was I think 5 or 6 other guys in camp with us that were hunting similar region of public land, and I think most days between those other 5 guys, they were maybe seeing, one hind or one small stag or whatever. One person actually shot a really nice, I think it was 13-incher and a hind in the same day, and then another person shot a 14-incher. So they are out there if you do your homework and put in a lot of effort. Both of those guys sat and pretty much did all-day sits for days and days and days on end. But it is obviously possible to be successful on really good deer in public.
Yeah, as you would have heard in the podcast, we've sort of been privileged where we've got family friends that have offered certain locations for the hog deer. I mean, they live down there, so it's, it was amazing, and we're forever grateful. But I remember being told that there was a few other hunters in the areas with rifles in certain tree stands and blinds, and just to get in early and get out late, and don't walk around because it sends up everything for everyone else. And anyway, I was privileged enough to see this small stag. It was probably about 9 inches, and same thing, was about 11 o'clock-ish, 11:30, maybe 12, when that sun just got on top of him. He got up and he sort of was rotating around, but he was using his antlers to scratch his back. So I've never seen that before. That was pretty cool. And then I found out through this family friend that I had left it, and I think about a week later that stag was shot, but it was the only stag that this particular hunter had seen. He was a rifle hunter, and he was hunting about a half a K, 500, 600 metres away from me in a different location, and he was shooting out to a different location because he knew I was there. And he said in the 13 or 14 days that he was there, that was the only deer or stag he saw. I shouldn't be laughing because it's a lot of hours. And I guess, I would have taken that 9 inch too if you come close enough, but it was just, he only got to about 75 metres. Yeah.
Oh, and that is the realisation of, well, the realistic expectation of public land hunting. Like it's pretty grueling work. Like it's probably similar to the US in a little bit, where it's like a lot of pressure, a lot of people packed into a small area. There is certainly small little nooks and crannies and stuff that, you can find your little spot and have some really good success. But for the most part, there's a lot of time just walking around, not seeing much and learning. And I think just talking to the guys down there, like with hog deer, it's probably one of the few species that I think you can actually get out and just like cover country and try and create opportunities. Like you just bump a heap of hog deer, and especially even whether it's public or private, like there's not big enough spots that once you bump them, they just move. Like you don't get those chances. And it is one of the few hunts, sadly, where I think you do get the advantage by just sitting up in like a tree stand or a blind or something like that. Maybe sitting over fresh water if there's no water and in a particular spot or whatever. But it's definitely one of these hunts that like just walking around in the knee-high tussocks, like, you may see one run off or whatever. But shooting one's just like not really going to work. And especially if you're hunting public, you're just going to ruin it for a lot of people, because the chance is you're probably scenting up or pressuring an area that someone's been sitting in all day, and then all of a sudden, you come walking past. And so just being respectful in that sense, I guess. And like what Dad was saying, like you really do, like he was sitting in there all day as well. Like he might come back for lunch at 2:00 in the afternoon, which in some ways is probably prime time. If it's like a nice sunny day, we found that, in the middle of the day, there was probably just as much activity as first light and last light. But very discreetly sort of get down from your tree stand or, your high seat or your ladder or whatever, pretty much walk straight to your car, like get in your car, leave, come back, discreetly walk up, sit back in there and, and then just, head on a swivel, glassing really to try and find them.
For the record, I did get to draw back on a hind. I found these really fresh tree rubs, and it was, I think, coastal banksia and a couple of little small tea trees, and they seemed to love the tea tree. And I repositioned myself to the opposite end because it was normally blowing from an easterly, and then it would cross over in the evening. So I thought this particular evening, I think I did go back for lunch, and I come in and I walked probably 500-600 metres in the opposite direction from where I was viewing from my tree stand, because I can see there was a lot of activity on that side. There was a lot of, just to paint the picture, there was a lot of thick blackberry bushes. They weren't mature, they weren't really high, but they were really thick and almost mosaiced around all these other sort of long grass, and I can just catch their ears or their antlers. And this particular day, I got myself a little chair, so I carried a little seat in, and I sat on a couple of main game trails that were going to the river, and I thought they'll have to come in for a drink sooner, rather than later. And this particular afternoon, I was lucky. I can see this hog deer hind sort of jumping through the grass, like hopping like a rabbit. It was ridiculous. And then I sort of anticipated where she was going to sort of stop, and I come to full draw waiting for her to pop out. And she just never did. She went to ground. They sort of almost get on their haunches and just dig through that grass because they bury their head down so low, their back rump area so much higher. And that's why they're probably called hogs, like all hog deer, because they're very similar to pigs where they sort of lead with their heads. And couldn't see her again, got the binoculars out looking, trying to, hear any noise. But anyway, so unfortunately, that was the only real excitement. That was under 20 metres and I still couldn't see through the long grass where she was. I was on one side of the blackberry patches and she was on the other, but I couldn't see her.
And that's the thing. Like, she could have just been sitting in the grass there and bedded down. Like, she may not have even necessarily been scared or smelt you or whatever. Like, she may have just bedded down in that blackberry bush there, and then that's like the end of your hunt, which is crazy, and just it's why these little things are so frustrating, in a way so addictive. But yeah, definitely with a bow, like, it's worth trying to, I'd probably almost recommend trying to get some private. I take my hat off to anyone that's shot even a male of the species or even a hog deer at all on public, because it very much is a numbers game, just trying to get opportunities, and you may spend literally years scanning through your optics till they feel like they're about to bleed and fall out, just to get those opportunities, and then to be actually successful would be quite unique. Just another thing from when I weighed my hog deer in, not that he asked if it was a bow or a rifle, but the person, I think out of 42 odd animals that he'd checked in, I think mine was only he couldn't remember exactly, but only the third or fourth with the bow that had been checked in that area to that point, which was only I think it was the 8th of April or something like that. But yeah, it just shows a reflection of like, they are very, very difficult with the bow, and especially on public land. Like, it's one of these things where I understand why a lot of people wait till it, the final animal or final deer species to get the 6, because they just are, a tremendous challenge with the bow, or really even with the rifle. When you're out hunting, your camouflage needs to blend in or cost you opportunities. That's why I run Numa camouflage clothing. Built for hunters who push hard, Numa is quiet, durable, and designed to disappear in everything from open tussock to thick mountain terrain. Whether you're heading out on a multi-day hunt, glassing big country, or slogging it out in the rain, Numa keeps you dry, comfortable, and helps you push further. So if you're gearing up for your next adventure, check out the full range at Venture Hunting and Outdoors and level up your hunting kit with Numa. Built for the outdoors, built for the hunt.
Sometimes they can be literally 100 metres from you. Like in this particular day, there was a massive stag. We called him Rusty because I got eyes on him by default. I sort of scared him out of the long grass when I was walking across to a particular dam, and I thought he was about 16, but a friend of mine ended up shooting him, and I think he was 14, but he had a very rusty sort of reddy coat. He had a white bib, and he was a beautiful looking animal. But back a little bit, where I was sitting, we had a massive clump of tea tree about 200 metres from me. And I was told that was a really good area that a stag had been working. And every day I spent most of my energy and time looking to see if he was going to pop out. Well, most of the day was pretty windy. And then it was about 2 o'clock. And because there's rifle hunters, we try to work with each other, and obviously for safety as well, and for courtesy and respect of other hunters. These particular lads were coming out of the public, and they were making their way out, and later on I found out that they saw this particular deer that I called Rusty coming out in the middle of the day out of this clump of tea tree because it got hot all of a sudden, so he was probably making his way to water or something. And it was crazy, and I didn't even see him later on. They were family friends who were taking the piss out of me, saying, "Mate, were you asleep? Were you not looking?" I can hear the car coming, but I didn't even think to look up at the car. I was thinking, because a lot of times there was days where I was in the tree stand, they come past, and the deer that were about 100 off me did not even change their behaviour while the car was driving past. So it just goes to show when they're in that thick cover in their little nurseries, they feel protected. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for any character change, if they pricked their heads up or ears or anything. They were just doing what they were doing, you know. I do know that they love their little blackberry leaves and new stuff. I was watching them do that a lot. That was fascinating to see.
Yeah, I think with going back to them, like I think one of their biggest assets or advantages they've got that they really play on is just that standing still and just, not getting noticed. Like, it's incredible to think, like, a lot of those family friends down there, like, they just say, like, there's so many places down there, even like not near public land or anything like that have hog deer on and off, and they just know it because they do a lot of fox hunting and stuff, and so they're out there spotlighting in the middle of the night shooting foxes, and it's crazy to see how many hog deer you find just in someone's like long grass paddock that they've been resting up for the cows or whatever, and that's like enough cover for 4 or 5 hog deer to move into, and you talk to the people about it and like, oh, do you know you have deer here? And they're like, nah, we've never seen a deer here, you know what I mean? But they live there all year round, and they just move with the long grass or move into like some blackberries like Dad said, and they are very good at remaining undetected, and especially like there were so many times when we were driving out or driving into somewhere or whatever, and you're just like, oh, there's some ears, and all of a sudden there's a hog deer like 30 metres off the track. But they've just remained still and hope that you don't notice.
Would you say they're cat-like? Like, I find they just sort of, I don't know, get down low and they walk, stop, check their surroundings with their senses. Watching them from the tree and just seeing how they react with, certain bird calls and things. They're more inclined to stay still and hope that they're camouflage because they're so well blended with their colours. They're so light and they're so, all the dry grass and, they look so well camouflaged.
I definitely think cat-like is a good description for them, especially in the way that sort of like cats. Like, I think they'll see you and they'll just like sit and hope that you don't see them, and they were like that too. But I think as soon as you make sort of eye contact with them, like from my previous experiences with sort of, the time that I was able to like draw on this deer at like 20 meters or whatever, like it's sitting there looking at me. And I've done that with cats before where they're like sitting there looking at you like, what are you? And you just like slowly draw back and then you can get a shot away. And so I think they're like that, and they just rely on their stealth. Like, I think they're just used to like never being seen. And then if they do detect something, they just rely on the fact that you're just not going to see them to get by, sort of thing. And then if they think if you've seen them, they'll just blatantly like run away and bark, which is pretty cute for a hog deer. But otherwise they'll just sort of slink away when they feel the time is right. So they're incredibly little, sneaky little critters, that's for sure.
Oh, look, they're with the Samba, they're a premier game animal. It's just, where they are. You see the sign, but especially after duck season, getting there, like all the shots, and they just go to ground, unfortunately. So, like you said, hats off to anyone that hunts them with a bow. I did have the privilege to hunt one morning. I was about to leave, and I had an offer from a family friend's friend, and he's a very accomplished bow hunter, and he said, do you want to try get off public and come and try private? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, so it's just so much different. And he sort of guided me in to, I think it was about a 10-incher, and he said, look, we try to manage them here, let them grow. Would you be happy with a 10-incher? I said, yeah. And we got to 100 metres, but then they just disappeared. And even to get that close on foot, and it was more accustomed to bow hunting or the type of style of hunting that we've been used to. Even in your podcast, I was listening to Aidan sort of just articulate how hard it is when you're hunting from a tree stand or from an elevated blind, and you're looking down and you think, oh yeah, there they are. And then you get down and all of a sudden everything's at your level, and it makes it so much harder because you need references. You need to, sort of get some sort of visual mark on where this deer was bedded or was travelling. But in this particular, it was different. It was sort of more tussocky and sort of, I guess it was grazed pasture land as well. So it was very different with scattered gums. And, we sort of, I had the privilege, I should say, to sort of get to about 100 after stalking them from a while away. And unfortunately, they just drift. They just do what they do. They just drift and blend. And if you don't, it's hard. Once they get into that mosaic of thicker stuff, it's stupid to push them. So it's all about timing, isn't it, really?
Oh, it's just, timing your moment. And really, I think for us, like, we just worked out, like, the best chance that we're going to have is sort of hunting them like chital deer, where you find one, hopefully watch it bed in a spot that you can actually get to it. Like, because them walking into the thicker stuff, it's like, cool, there's a hog deer in there, but that's about it. So it's like watching them bed in a suitable spot and then trying to just get in there and, get it done and position yourself, knowing that they're roughly in this spot, and then hope that they're going to stand up. But like, it was crazy because we had ones that like bedded and did that, and then, like, you'd watch one's bed and then they wouldn't get, like, on the over the boundary fence, and you'd watch them bed and then they wouldn't get up for like 6 or 8 hours. And they're in spots that you could like not see them bedded, but you were pretty confident that you'd see them, and they were just like super comfortable. Whereas like, I think most other deer species, will get up, and I don't know if it's just because we were missing them, but yeah, it was definitely, I don't know, it was like, you got to find them in the right spot and then have the right wind, get in there, hopefully not scare any more deer on the way there or something. And then, hopefully you get that chance.
You know what I found, which was fascinating? I was there for 7 days, I think, and I did the same thing most days, except for that one evening hunt when the wind was changing. I got to the other side where the rub trees were. But most days I would see the same deer within 100 metres of where they last bedded the day before. So they probably did their same routine, and unless they're going to be pushed out of there by, people walking through, or I don't know, I don't think they'd change their habitat or their behaviour, because where they were was just perfectly suited to them. They had everything there that they needed.
Yeah, I think once they they find that like, it's good habitat, and the thing is, down there, like, there's so much feed and so much good habitat. Like, there's feed, water, shelter everywhere. So really, I think the thing is finding the spot where there's no pressure. You know what I mean? Like, they'll sit somewhere all of April, and I think that's the contrast between private and public that we're trying to paint, I guess. Like, they'll sit in the public all season and not change their habitat, and they will do a degree in public where they'll start in the public and there's heaps of deer in the public, but then come like the first days, especially if like heaps of people are walking around and they've been bumped once or twice, they're living here, they've lived there for 11 months of the year or roughly, and then all of a sudden someone on the 1st of April walks through, bumps them, like, oh shit, it's that time of year again. Hear a few people, if you hear a few gunshots or whatever, for some lucky hunters, which is awesome. And they're like, okay, sick, we're going to go to ground. I'm going to go to that little hidey hole that I went and sat in all of last April. And then they go there and they probably just sit there for all of April until, they're like, oh, it's safe, let's drift back to, where we were or whatever, and set up that home range again. But I genuinely think that they'll like go and just sit in holes essentially and not move. And I mean, unless you go and find that or have previous knowledge, it can be very hard. Like, I think trail cameras is pretty, sort of helpful in these situations where you can find what animals are moving around and see, if you can pattern like a big stag or whatever. But yeah, I think just finding, like, looking at maps and stuff like that and trying to understand like public access and where people can get to and where they can't get to, or where may be harder to get to, and then, go and seeing what signs there and then just be patient is probably what I'd be doing if I was hunting public land. But yeah, I think they're just moving because of the pressure. And like what Dad was saying, if they don't feel that pressure, they'll just sit there happily. But the second you go and walk and scare them and stuff, they, bon voyage, they hit the hills and go find somewhere else where they're not going to get shot, hopefully.
Born out of necessity, Day 6 designs and builds specialised equipment for hunters. Their arrows are bomb-proof and consistent. I've been running their 275 spine HD shafts for the past year or so. In that time, I've taken big game animals such as bull elk, roaring red stags, Asiatic water buffalo, wild boar, and more. For whatever the critter, I'm confident sending a day 6 shaft their way. This split between the usual 250 and 300 spine shaft is perfect for the 150 grain broadhead that I run. Coming in at 11.8 grains per inch, my total setup comes in at around 560 grains total. Based on countless pass-throughs with some obscure shot angles, this setup is perfect for all game here in Australia and beyond. Head to the Day 6 website to check out their range, or if you want to check out the Day 6 range in person here in Australia, then Venture Hunting is now stocking their products in-store and online.
Well, that wraps up the hog deer. Let's shift gears and talk about something that I'm probably a little bit more passionate about, and something that I find probably a little bit more exciting, and that is hunting big dirty red stags. So Dad's actually his final stag, or final deer I should say, in the Australian 6 deer species slam is actually a red stag. So he's been up here for the last 10 days or so, and to paint the picture, it has been a little bit of a trying time. He got up here, I think, the 13th of April through to the 23rd, and they've definitely come off the boil a bit, and it's quietened down a lot. There was only a couple of days of roaring, which we'll get into, really, and even then they sort of roar in the dark and then shut up at first light. But what I actually want Dad to do before we jump into this hunt is probably just give us a bit of history over some of the highlights of your actual previous red stag hunts, and just talk about what stories and stuff you've got there leading into this hunt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, my only real red deer experiences have been through the Ridge, which was run by Clark and Debbie McGee, and that was when I first picked up a bow. I remember on this particular hunt, I think I did it for 2 years running. The first year, I think there was myself and maybe even Brett Verco was there. Yeah, that was, or maybe it's the second year, I'm not sure. And the rest were rifle hunters, but we all got allotted a certain part of the block. And it was exciting because it was done in the Brisbane Valley Ranges, and, I got to experience roaring reds. And one of the key takeaway moments was you can never underestimate a roar. I remember you telling me that and I've experienced with you do quite a good roar, but you got different tones, different aggressive sort of pitches. But I remember hearing this early morning, like we were out in the dark, walking the roads and trying to pick up thing. I remember this little sort of little thing, and I go, oh, that must be an older deer. Like, I was very inexperienced, so I walk up, and it was a 3, this little scrawny little thing, and I've gone, oh. But you got to check out every roar, right? And then there was another time, and this was my only real time where I drew back on the deer, and same thing, it was like a little bit more passionate than that, a little bit more gusto, but it was a 4, was a very mature animal. He had a beautiful spread, he had the thickness, he had everything. He didn't have all the points, but he was a deer going back. He had a grey sort of muzzle. For me, if I had got him, I probably would have had him mounted, because apparently Clark, and that's one thing about Clark, he knew all his deers. He knew, obviously he lives in very passionate hunter and very passionate conservationist in regards to trying to cull and manage herds and all that. But anyway, this particular deer, I tried to pick him up the night before. I can hear him roaring, and he was doing that really tinny, light sort of roar, and I didn't get eyes on him properly. And I went back the next day because I was explaining to Clark a little bit about him, and he said, oh, he could be that older deer, and he'd be an amazing trophy if you can get him. So I ended up going back to this particular game trail that was coming off. It was sort of flatter country set up along 2 main ridges, peaks, I should say, and I was sort of in a bit of a spur, so to speak. And I remember him coming down and sort of giving out a roar, and he was sort of walking from side to side like he'd been, excuse my French, shagging all night and punching on. And I was on my knees because I was in sort of long grass, but or a bit of cover, but I felt that standing up was going to give me away, and I had practiced that shot, and he got to about literally 14 feet, and this is a family joke that James keeps going on about. But at that time, I don't know why I just didn't think that an ethical shot was to go into the brisket through the chest. And it wasn't until years later where we all, I think, had the privilege of watching Brad Smith's videos where he's, took out multiple reds and fellows with frontal shots. And it's like the aha moment. And I always joke about the boys where even though I don't have the Grand Slam, I could have had it if I wasn't so ethical. And James takes the piss out of it every time. Because every time I mention something, he goes, oh yeah, 14 feet. You were 14 feet away from that deer, right? But yeah, that was my only real red deer experience where I had a paid membership and a paid hunt, and did that 2 years in a row. And then I just got onto pigs and pursued other things, and of course this is my second year now post-rut hunting reds with James, which has been incredible, especially this trip. I feel like I've grown every time.
Going back to the 14 feet thing in our family, it's not because I take the piss out of him. It's because, I do, but it's because every time he tells like a story where he's like, oh, I got in on this cat, or I got in on this fox, or I got in on, anything. And I'm like, and he's like, yeah, it was 14 feet. And I'm like, no, you mean 14 meters. He's like, no, 14 feet. I'm like, you don't realize how close 14 feet is. I'm like, I've never seen you 14 feet from anything.
Well, hold on. That cat I shot was 5 meters tops. Yeah,
that's
just
an
for the record,
exception.
I've just shot a cat, a black cat, on this hunting red deer, and I was in this particular valley, and I shot this cat. And it was a great shot. Apart from I had to retrieve him out of some blackberries, but it was all good.
But how many other animals this trip have you had at 14 feet?
A few foxes. That fox I whistled in last night, he was at 5 feet, but I couldn't shoot him because there was a limb in the way. So sometimes you do get lucky and get close, but getting close and dispatching an animal is two different things. So that maybe is my curse. Maybe I should learn how to shoot long distance.
Or just stop something before it's at 5 meters, apparently. Or maybe try and get into 14 feet in some of these scenarios, because I'm yet to see it as often as he tells us, put it that way, guys. But yeah, so Dad's obviously had a lot of experience chasing reds in the Brisbane Valley, and he came up last year when I got some access, and we did a pretty miserable, I think it was middle of June trip, and it was, pretty rainy, pretty shitty. And we really were just focused around chasing stags coming off feed. And to be honest, this trip was meant to be, I thought they were still going to be rutting pretty good. This is sort of the first rut I've really had after getting a bit more access and probably having actual places to hunt during the rut where you're going to hear roaring and stuff like that. Like previous years, Aiden and I, we've got the YouTube series up now from last year's rut 2025, and it probably looks action-packed, but for us, there was about 25 odd days of hunting there, of which probably the most action was in southeast Queensland. Like the stuff that we were hunting here in New South Wales, like there was a lot of days with, without seeing red deer or without even hearing a roar most of the time. And you guys have sort of seen the highlights, whereas this year we're in amongst the action a fair bit more and actually got to hear and see a lot of roaring stags. And I was sort of probably a little bit late in organising Dad's trip. We'd just gone down to hog deer. But as he keeps reminding me, it probably felt more like chasing, the secret and elusive samba deer rather than red deer. But
that's what I did say. I said, mate, thank you for the invite. I said, if I want to hunt samba deer, I can hunt them in Victoria.
He's getting soft in his old age, I tell him.
No, I had some awesome experiences. I've learnt a lot. I think I'm better this year than I was last year. And obviously post-rut, it presents, they're not, we did hear 1 or 2 days early in the morning. We're getting up for the record about 4:15, quick breakfast, and then we're getting out to strategic spots. But I think I am 61, so I was a little bit deaf, James, like, can you hear that? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. He goes, well, that was a roar. And then something else would happen. I go, is that a roar? He goes, no, that's a cow.
Yeah. Oh,
But they're in the distance. I mean, we're talking about, multiple ranges and, like.
There's no doubt in my mind that Dad missed over 75% of the roars that occurred in my presence, let alone the ones I sadly was flat out working, just because obviously having a bit of time off with Aiden, hunting and filming, and then doing the hoggy stuff. So came back and was just inundated with work. Aiden had to leave, sadly, and he was going to try and line up a few days with Dad. So then Dad was on his own a little bit, but in those days, a fair bit.
Thank you.
But in those days, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have missed a lot of roars that were going on. But
I saw some. I think I saw 3 mature stags that. And for the record, I did say I'm not shooting anything unless I'm going to put it on the wall just to complete the Grand Slam. And I remember getting. I ranged at 22 metres to a 6.6, but it was a very, very young deer with great genetics. And I said to James, he was going into a bedding area of just tea tree, and I was surprised. I can hear his antlers sort of hitting the tea tree and making this sound. I just was surprised that it was so tight, so thick. It was probably equivalent to a lounge, a lounge area in someone's, in your typical home. So it wasn't a big area of tea tree, but it was very blowy. It was on a little bit of a north-facing slope because the wind was either blowing from the east or the west, so he was still getting a bit of sun, and he dipped into this tea tree. And I did get close to him, but I looked at him and thought, geez, he's a young deer, but what a beautiful deer he'll become in 4 years' time, I reckon. I reckon he was 2-3 years old.
Yeah, he's probably, to be fair, if you thought he was young, he's probably 2.5. Because if he was 3.5, you probably would have shot him from the experience.
No, not really.
Definitely. So, that's the thing with having incredible genetics and being very blessed. Most of the deer that get shot in the area, I reckon, are probably 3.5, where 2.5-year-olds, you can identify them as a young animal because you can do the comparison to the older animal. And then, once they get a little bit more mass and length and age, and most of them are sort of 6x6s or 7x6s by then, pretty nice tops. Most people are going to be shooting and pulling the trigger on them. And it's pretty rare that they sort of get past that. That's sort of, really why we're sort of quite selective on when we're hunting.
Well, then, can you tell us a little bit about Lucky 7? Because I would have shot him. And to me, he looked like a maybe 4.5, 5-year animal.
Yeah, so Lucky 7, it's sort of hard, but I personally think Lucky 7, I would be surprised. So it's hard without aging them via their teeth, but just from his body size, mannerisms, all that type of stuff, I think he's probably 3.5, and I'd be very surprised if he was more than 4.5.
He was a beautiful. I'd probably shoot him then. I would have definitely shoot.
Oh, you definitely would. And most people would. And this is the thing with...
And he was the star of my show because I got to... I think I had 1, 2, 3, not including that fourth one where you saw him, but we couldn't get the jump on him, and then you called up that spiker that come right up to us. So I won't include that because I wasn't involved. I was there, but we never got to see him again. We just saw him that one time, then he sort of disappeared. But he was the only deer that I was really concentrating on, apart from the one that got the jump on us when we were going to the back country. He was magnificent.
The way that, to give people a bit of context, so what Dad really, or with my sort of guidance in a way, but what we were really concentrating on in this sort of transitioning into post-rut period, I guess, was the hunt strategy that we focused on was the fact that these guys had no rain. So normally by now we should have probably had just say 200 mil of rain, and they've had about 15 mil, which happened to fall about 2 days before we left to go to hog deer. So what that's meant is that the places that don't have cattle in them or sheep in them have a tiny, like literally 3 inches of green pick on them. So, and it's only like 2 or 3 paddocks that are like that. And so the deer have naturally, even though one of these paddocks is like extremely open, the deer have naturally congregated to them and they hit them in the night, and then they like travel, in this case, like a couple of kilometers back to thick cover. But what it's done is it's sort of given Dad a starting point every morning, and sort of planned his afternoon hunts on where he's seen deer and what stags. But really we hunted the same sort of mob of probably 10 or so hinds.
With rotating stags.
Yeah, with rotating stags. The exciting thing for me, and it was probably a little bit hard because we really are passionate about identifying deer from like year to year and looking at footage and stuff, and because we film them all, it was interesting for me seeing that even going away for 2 weeks, like I'd say probably 75% of the deer, 75% of the stags had like cycled through, and there was like new stags in the area. Lucky 7 was probably the only exception for a mature animal that was still in the area. Most of the other stags that we saw were new, and actually we saw stags that we'd seen in certain spots like 5 or 6 Ks away with other girls in other spots. So just showing how they're like moving around and sort of trying to find that new hind in different locations and stuff like that. When it comes to broadheads, Cayuga broadheads set the standard. Their full range is designed for every bow hunter, giving you unmatched accuracy and cutting power. The pilot cut is my personal favourite. It's engineered for smooth flight, deep penetration, and lethal performance, making it one of the best broadheads on the market. Go to their website today and use code TWIN10 to get 10% off your order. Don't leave your shot to chance. Upgrade to Cayuga broadheads and take your hunting to the next level. Have you got some like favorite, I guess like I've sort of given the structure of the hunt in terms of hunting off feed sources and sort of moving into bedding areas, but have you got any like highlights or takeaway lessons that you've learnt from?
Just to elaborate more what you're saying, I think for you, the few days that you were there, you established that post-rut they were, under condition, they were tired, they were weary, but they were still hanging around the girls to see if any girls were cycling, because, I had the experience where I had... I can't remember. I think he was a double 6, but he wasn't an older deer, but he was a nice deer. And I wasn't close enough to get a proper gauge on how big he was. But he was coming off feed, and they were making their way to this little cutout where they would then disappear into the back blocks, which went on for ranges, and it's thick and it goes forever. But 2 experiences with him, this particular stag. One of them was I was watching him. I started off, James said, I found him, run down to this particular spot, I'm going to pick you up, and I'm going to drop you off in this other area. And I watched him, and I followed him for about 3 Ks, but I could never get close enough to him, but I was fortunate enough to see where he went in, and then James and I made a plan of attack for the next day. And James put me in a different spot. I had to walk in about 1 K and a bit to get the wind right, and I set myself up. But prior to that, sorry, let me just jump back. When I was watching him, he was herding his hinds, but there was one particular hind that must have been coming into season. And for anyone who watches quarter horse, the way they cut a weaner or a cow, how they sort of go from left to right, and dust was kicking up, and I just never seen that before with red deer. And this guy was herding them all, and this one particular hind, and she must have been, some high-ranking hind, because the other 3 hinds that were there with her were just waiting to see what she was going to do. She was going to try to break to the right. He was cutting her straight up the guts back into the back blocks, and he managed to do that, but she was on such a... what's the word? She was intending to go back to the right, but he pushed her straight up north. And just to see how hard and how much energy they used and how aggressive he was an eye-opener. But the good thing was that set up me for the next morning, because I knew they were doing the same thing. And James said to me, make sure you sit near this dam, because they get a drink before they disappear and go to bed. They've had their feed, they get some water, and the wind was blowing for an easterly, so I sort of set off about 200 from the dam, and I found a perfect spot, a little bit elevated, could see left and right if I needed to ambush. I was in my socks, And I thought, nah, James said get closer to the dam. So I moved, and I only moved about 150, and unknowns to me, this stag was on his own, and he comes up this pathway, and he would have got to about 30 metres of where I was sitting, and he stopped, and I can see him, and he just sends something. One thing with deer, you've got a little bit of mercy if they see something that they quite don't understand or like, but if they smell you, he just broke. He stopped. He just didn't like something and just smashed through. And funny enough, as he smashed up the valley, he put up a medium-sized boar and a sow just camped a little bit higher than me. So the wind was blowing from an easterly to the west. They were a little bit higher. So as I'm watching with the binoculars, I see this boar and sow break as well out of their beds. But that was definitely an exciting sort of experience, those two things. And that was the same stag. I mean, we haven't got on to the hunt about Lucky 7. That was...
Was that yesterday?
That was yesterday morning, right? Then you said to me, I get a text and said, where are you? And I said, mate, I've just missed a stag. You know, I got in the wrong spot. He goes, I don't care. You need to run, fat boy. He said you need... And I remember carrying my backpack. My backpack was flapping around, so I'm running down, and he's come to pick me up in the easterly corner of the paddock, and then he took me to another spot, which was the opposite end.
We got to give some people some context here. So, like what I said, so I because I was working flat out. So what I would do is, if I was working in the area, like in the direction that Dad was probably about an hour and a half from me. But because with cattle work, if I was working in the area that he was staying at, I would get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, drive all the way out to where he was staying so I could pick him up and then save him some legwork getting to where he needed to be, because the deer were like, I'd put him in a spot where he was camping pretty much close to where the deer were feeding, but they would walk a couple of Ks to thick cover to bed up. So what I would do is I would then pick up Dad at 4:40, drive him to a spot that I knew the deer were walking to. I would then be his almost like eye in the sky and get up on a ridge so that I could essentially be his like wingman and talk to him and be finding stags and stuff for him and try and talk him in on where these deer were going and stuff. And then like some days I would, in this scenario, I'd seen a heap of deer leave the crop, but there was no stag in there. And so that's where I was like, hey, I'm going to drive back. I've just found another group of deer though that has a stag. I need to go to work. You're going to make me late, but I'll come and pick you up and drive you. Otherwise it's going to be like a 4.5K dash. And the chance is the deer are probably not going to be there by the time he gets there. So I said, run down off the ridge. I drove over, picked him up, drove him all the way around, got the wind right for him, dropped him off and said, hey, like the closest I can get you is like 1.5 K. Follow this, gully system back and you should be able to find this group of stags or this group of deer. I said, there's at least 2 stags in there. I didn't get a great look at them because I pretty much ran straight away as soon as I saw them and they were like, I don't know, maybe 2 Ks from where I was when I saw them.
They were in a very tight sort of gully, surrounded by just a huge ridge covered with all these thick cover. And then left and right of that was rolling hills that were really not that scrub. They were scrubby, but they weren't as thick. And you said, listen, take it slow. They're going to be bedded in there somewhere. Take your time. And for the record, I think you dropped me off at 8 o'clock in the morning at this point because we've been up. You picked me up, I think it was closer to 10 to 5. We jumped in, you dropped me off one spot. That's when the other stag, that fell through. And then you said, no, get out, let me pick you up. You dropped me off and you said bye. And I think I got to where I actually had eyes on the stag, or at this point it was just a stag, was 9:20. So it took me an hour and a half to walk that 2K or a K and a bit. And I was glassing everywhere, couldn't find him. And it was funny because I finally texted you. I said, right, I found the stag. And you said, no, there's got to be more. I said, well, I've looked around and it seemed, and you go, oh, maybe that's the other stag I saw that come off that ridge. And I said, yeah. And then I sort of started walking in and I can see, so the wind's blowing from the east. He's looking northwest. So he's got everything covered, but he's in really thick cover. And I think the biggest mistake people make, or me personally, is that I don't glass enough. And I think I just need to understand that you need to just move very slowly, considering that you've got a lead hind there, and that's in all these hunts that I've had thus far, it's always the lead hind that busts me. I find that post-rut, the stags are tired, they're sitting down. Yes, they're looking your way, but they're chewing their cud, and you can see they're just docile. They're they're just worn out. Whereas you look around and you see the hinds are just sharp, and the way they strategically sort of maneuver themselves, it's almost like they've made a little bit of a circle, and each deer's got responsible for a certain vantage point. And what started off with what I thought was one stag, I took a couple of steps over a bit of a hollow and I got up a little bit higher. And mind you, I'm in socks now. I've got no backpack socks, and I'm moving very slow with my bow up, using my binoculars on top of the bow so there's minimal movement. And I looked over to my right, and there's a mob of hinds that I didn't see. And just a little bit to the left of them was a magnificent stag, which I then found out was Lucky 7. So I was on again. Like, after having that experience with the other stag that morning, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I text James and he goes, go and kill the stag. I go, it's not that easy, mate. He goes, take your time. You've got him bedded. Take your time.
It was a pretty good opportunity.
It's in really thick cover. I had a lot of branches in my favour, a lot of obstacles, but the problem was that I found that they were all looking my way because I had the wind on their back. And unfortunately, I just didn't anticipate how good the matriarch or this hind's eyesight was. And she picked up a little bit of movement. She didn't know what it was. It was just enough to warrant a bit of attention. So she didn't stop looking at me for about 15 minutes. And the only saving grace is I did not move. So she got up, she looked my way, and then she forgot about me and started to feed out. And sure enough, slowly but surely all the rest of the deer followed her. So that set me up for my next attempt. So what happened after that was they've moved about 200 metres into the open, and the only cover I had was a few boulders, and the rest was open paddock. So then I give James a call, and he goes, how'd you go? I said, I think I busted them. He goes, where are they? I said, they're still in front of me feeding. He goes, well, you didn't bust them because they would have been gone. I said, go and get them. I said, well, I've ranged at the stag. I got one stag or two stags which are smaller, and he knew which ones were, to my right, bedded in some trees on a ridge line. That ridge line come up a little bit higher. I had the hinds up higher, and this guy was 170 metres to 176 metres in the open of just nothing. And then there was a couple of boulders there. There was a dead blackberry bush, and then he was parked in between this really green bush with a couple of boulders. So he was sitting looking directly at me. And I said, James, I need to crawl there. He goes, well, off you go. He goes, you need to get there. He goes, you've trained for this? I said, okay. So I remember getting...
Side note, he has not trained for this.
And then I remember, I think I was counting 20. What are they called when you're on the ground doing that? GOJ would crawl? I don't know what they're called.
It was belly crawling.
Belly crawl. So I said, do 20 stop glass. So I did 20. By 40, I've gone, I look back and see where the tree was. I didn't really make up that much ground. But I got to, I think 20 metres of my blackberries. And then I knew behind the blackberries he was bedded, and I thought he's going to slowly make his way to the hinds. What I didn't realise is the hinds were a little bit more elevated than me. And when I started, and this is another key takeaway, be patient and do not, for 1 minute, those 1%ers do not get lazy. I should have remained flat, but I actually just lifted up a little bit to sort of have a glass, see if his antlers were looking my way, whatever. And so all of a sudden, I sort of turned around to my left, and up high, I can see a hind at about 120 metres looking my way, and sort of, she let out not an alarming big bark, but it was a little bark, right? I guess a bark's a bark, but, and then, I don't know, I couldn't move, so I laid down flat, and I'm looking up straight at where this stag was because he was elevated higher than me on this bench. And about 15 minutes later, she gave out 2 or 3 more barks. Didn't know what I was, but it was enough. The wind, she couldn't smell me. I know that. But she just saw something that she wasn't happy with. So this is twice this. So she's probably thinking, no, I saw something shifty go on 200 metres away. This guy's come back for a second dibs, and then she let out those 2 or 3 barks, and then the stag just gingerly got up, and he was sort of doing that little timid walk where he's making his way back to him. But I ranged him at 52 metres, and I thought, that's worlds apart for me. I can't shoot that far. I guess Americans do that very well, and we've got a couple of Aussie boys that can do it, but 52 for me is like, nah. Anyway, it was good. That was another experience I had with him. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on today's story?
Yeah, can do. I just want to talk a little bit about that hunt. I wasn't there, obviously, but knew where the hunt went on. And my just educating the people of this podcast. So, like, it would be a very, 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 very rare circumstance that I feel like I need a belly crawl, personally, especially if they're sleeping. Like, I would rather be able to see them and see that their eyes are closed and move freely and confidently back myself, that even if they're looking at me, that I can see with my binos that their eyes are closed, and that, you know, like having no cover, like having...
Even in the open. Like
100%.
I virtually walked it past just bare grass that was probably 3 inches high, if that, just yellow grass, yeah?
I would rather do that or try and use topography or something like that to...
It was impossible. The only thing was, you did say, listen, they've gone down to beds quite early still. I think it was now 9:30 or 10, maybe 10. And you said, well, they're going to bed down for the rest of the day. Just sit tight. And I probably should have done that. But then, I don't know. You know, we never will.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, between 10 and 2 for most species, you're going to be pretty safe that they're going to be sleeping. The only good thing about belly crawling, I guess, is if you do get busted, at least from my also experience, like if something like that hind gets up and starts barking, you literally just sit there, and normally you're so tired, you just take a nap for half an hour and then just wake up and then start trying to slowly look around. And by the time they've sat there and stared at the log for half an hour, you know, they're pretty content that they were looking at just a log or something, and you can go back to your stalk. But that's probably the only advantage and the only thing I've ever really liked about belly crawling.
Can I just tell you a little bit of story before you get on to today's hunt?
Yeah, there's just a couple of extra things I want to add, just from the limited hunts that I got to do with you before today's hunt. So we weren't really, like, we were doing a fair bit of like just cold call hind calling. Me personally, especially after I banned Dad from hearing, after I heard his hind call, and just how disgusting it was, and got him to stop doing it so he could stop educating my deer. So that was fun. And then we went on a couple of hunts together and just did a heap of cold hind calling and didn't really get a lot of response. Like, the only time that we really saw a bit of success was when we'd actually, like Dad said earlier, we'd seen Lucky 7. We lost him in some thick stuff, and we went into this gully, and I did like a couple of hind calls, and it was pretty cool, because there was a hind and a fawn, or a calf, you know, a yearling at this stage, I guess. And I just heard, like, we're sitting there, and I can hear, it's so silent and it's so dry. And I'm like, I can hear something walking around down there. And then all of a sudden just heard like, "Meh," like back. And I was like, okay, that's sick. Like, they're pretty much talking to me. And then, we snuck in there and it was just a hind and a yearling. And I don't know if the stag had split off with a couple of other hinds or this was just a completely different one. But it was cool, like just getting in on them. And we sort of just watched them feed at 60 or 70. And it was cool in the sense that because we were hind calling back to them, we could get away with a lot of, like there's no way that if me and or Dad and I were just walking through the bush, we would have even got half as close as what we did, sort of thing. But the fact that I was sort of every so often doing hind calls and like, we were pretty much stalking them, but that was as quiet as what deer were just walking through the bush. And every so often you'd break a stick and you'd like look back at each other, but they didn't even lift their heads because they thought we were deer. Then we got into a position, and I just said to Dad, because I said, I don't know if this stag's here or not. They're clearly, like, no one's roaring at this point, so I'm not going to roar. But I just said, I'm going to try some raking. And that's where I put Dad down below me where I thought the, where I could see these hinds and stuff and where there's like a good feeder gully, and I thought these other stag, and hinds might have been. And anyway, I ended up just started going to absolute town on the sapling. And it didn't take long for me to hear a couple of footsteps coming in from behind us, sadly sort of pretty close to downwind. And I'm not going to lie, my little butthole puckered a couple of times when I saw antler tips walking through the dogwood, but it was just a spiker. Like I just saw a flash of antler and I was like, if this is this stag, I'm going to be devastated. And he came into about 20 meters and was just browsing and eventually he did get our wind after, giving us a really good shot opportunity and stuff if he was more mature stag or a stag at all. But I think it just goes to show like how those sort of non-vocal cues can really sort of work, and how like that spiker would have for sure been able to hear our hind calls in this post-rut period, but wasn't really interested in coming in. But then as soon as I started raking and stuff, he's like, oh, okay, that's something a bit different. Like I'll maybe go and check that out. It might be a bit more aggressive. He, obviously came in. So maybe just that little strategy where if you do have a stag in some thick bush or whatever, or maybe something just to try and have in the back of your mind, that ace up your sleeve. But it was just a cool experience having a stag in, because we had plenty during the rut, but it had been a lot of like looking at deer, but you're sort of chasing them from afar and trying to intercept them and stuff and ambush them. And it was, very much all or nothing, where it seemed like we were right in amongst them or just watching them from 500 meters. It was cool to have those couple of encounters in the thick stuff and actually sort of feel like we're amongst it.
Bringing target precision to hunting camp, Option Archery makes specialist hunting gear. Their quivilizers are one of our favourite bits of kit. You would have seen us running these for the past few years across all of our adventures, whether in Australia or abroad. The quivilizer is an extremely unique 2-in-1 stabilizer, combined arrow quiver, cutting weight with its clever 2-in-1 design. Their option sights are versatile in this regard also, offering both single or multi-pin sight housings within the same sight. I run the Option 4S sight. That's one single pin sight paired with the 3 fixed pin options within the sight housing. As currently constructed, I can easily shoot 20, 30, 40 or 50 meters with the fixed pins present, or simply flip them out of the way and utilize a single pin slider. My slider allows me to shoot from 20 all the way out to 80 if desired and covers absolutely every scenario. Have a bedded elk at 60 and need the single pin clarity? Use that option. Have a red stag running into a hind call and not sure where he'll pull up? Use a multi-pin sight and be covered from 5 to 50 meters. We love these incredible products from Option Archery and know you will too. Shop their products today by checking out their website.
Yeah, just before we elaborate on today's hunt, I'll tell you what was a cool experience and given me so much more respect for the lead or a hinds in particular. I was trying to, as we've sort of mentioned, James wasn't always there, so I was trying to learn a little bit about the country we were hunting in and trying different areas, and I ended up going across into a couple of different ridges, and I hit this particular spot that was beautiful, and I'm giving it a good glass, and I was hunting in a northerly direction, had a crosswind come in from the east, but my intentions were to do a big loop and hunt back around, and I was just fortunate enough to catch just a bit of a contrasting colour. And I said to James, I was so surprised how I was on one ridge and I caught a hind and a calf on another ridge, but it was very rocky outcrop, and she was just on like a little bench, but in reality, she was only 70 metres. I ended up ranging her. She was 70 metres away, and I just sat there and watched her for about half an hour. But what was astonishing for me was she was very calm, very relaxed, and just chewing her cud. And I can see she was just going through the motion, very relaxed. And all of a sudden, because anything left of me, I was looking north. I had the wind coming from an easterly direction from my right-hand side. Now, anything to my left obviously is catching my scent, and it must have been a wallaby or something has caught my scent and hopped away. She's automatically stopped chewing, propped up, and her whole body sort of changed, and her ears started flickering down into this little sort of dry creek bed, so to speak, which was in between two high pinch points. And she sat there fixated on that spot for over 20 minutes. So this is how dedicated and how disciplined they are and how switched on they are to survival. So, can you imagine when you're bashing around the bush and they hear you from 100 metres away, they just sit there and they're looking at you and they go, yep, danger, bang, they're over the next ridge or whatever. So like I was saying to James, I said, I find that if we were only hunting stags, you'd probably have a better shot. But the fact that they associate in a mob group and they're sort of got lead hinds and a couple of hinds that are so switched on and so, observant of everything, I find it makes it so much harder.
Yeah, it's pros and cons of hunting like a mob animal in the sense that I think they're a lot easier to find because there'd be times that you see one hind and that leads you into 10 hinds and a stag, as opposed to like if the stags were just genuinely off by themselves at the moment, like there was plenty of times that you see a stag, but they're also traveling and hence then make them like very unpredictable and very hard to like relocate. If you just like get in on a stag and you're at 100, it's like, oh, sick, this is a great opportunity. But otherwise, like, yeah, in some ways I'd rather just be getting in. It was the same thing probably as the hog deer. It's like a lot of the time that we're going to be successful on this hunt, we're going to be, finding something at first light and being able to intercept them. So knowing, like having that previous knowledge and knowing, they are going to feed back in this direction and try and get, work out with the wind, can we get there and can we get in on them and be successful? Or like following them back to a bed and then them bedding in an area that we can actually get in on and do it in the middle of the day.
They're so blended, though. You have to be very disciplined in glassing a lot and moving slow because, like, I was surprised where she was parked on that little embankment, so to speak, in amongst a lot of rocks, and there was just a little bit of dirt. I wouldn't check the bed out later on, but I was surprised how, it was just open, but it was south-facing. Like I said, I was walking north. She was south-facing, so she was out of the wind and out of the sun, so it was quite cool and just sitting there chewing her cud. But look, I think we're blessed when we go out hunting and we go out into the outdoors and we experience so many different things that, it's not always about, I suppose, the dispatch of an animal. It's just learn more about them. And I feel like definitely this trip I've come away feeling a lot more exposed to so many of my weaknesses.
Yeah, I think like not picking on Dad, but probably just going through it for people's understanding. Like the biggest things, so we hunted together for this morning, and like after one, obviously hunting a lot, and especially like hunting a lot in the last, probably hunted 20 out of the last 30 days sort of thing. But the biggest things that I sort of noted with you, even this morning, was like what you can and can't get away with sort of thing, like moving in. And I'll tell a pretty cool story. Like a farmer had actually said a couple of weeks ago in this particular paddock, like actually when Aiden was here, hey, I've seen a really good stag and a couple of hinds. And we just didn't get there because we were chasing, stags elsewhere, and yeah, like had plenty of opportunities and stuff. And we ended up, so I ended up going there with Dad this morning, which was his last morning. And at first light, actually saw this stag, which was really cool. And he is a really good stag. And it's one that we'd actually seen, like I said, about 6.5 Ks in a straight line earlier in the rut. The problem is he's like a cracker. Like he's like a really, really mature, nice stag, and will be brilliant next year if hopefully he can get through. But the problem is he's actually snapped off his main beam right down at his brow tine. So he, for us anyway, it's like, well, I'd rather see him get another year older and he'll be like a proper giant next year if he can get through. But yeah, it was pretty cool. Like going back to then watching Dad and stuff, like it was interesting just watching him move and how he moves and stuff, and like when he moves. And I think that's like the biggest thing, like picking, like there was moments in that stalk where we were like coming in and stuff, and Dad would keep moving, and I was like, oh, you could have seen us there and stuff. And then he'd be stopped and I'd be moving when, like just using topography and stuff. But like then there was moments where I just said to Dad, I said, hey, I want to get in and get some video. And I had a big tripod, 6-foot tripod plus me. And he weaved in behind this blackberry bush, and we were at like 120. And I literally just started like running because it was like open, just dusty ground. And it was like first light, so it was pretty quiet. And ran into this blackberry bush. And as I got to like 30, I started slowing down. And I'm like, oh, I expected him to actually have walked to the next blackberry bush. And then I couldn't see him. Like I was sort of tiptoeing and like couldn't see him behind it. And I'm like, oh, he should be at the next bush, but I can't see him, which tells me he's probably still in this bush. And all of a sudden then I do see antler tips and could hear him chewing. And anyway, he walked out like perfectly broadside, got some absolute sick footage at like 20 meters, like full dead to rights. And he walked past and got some, like I said, some just absolute epic footage. But for me, one thing that was really disappointing about finding that one antler stag was I feel like, Dad had like 10 days of sort of grinding it out and had some opportunities, but this was like, with me helping him a little bit, like hopefully this was going to be it on like finding this other stag that we hadn't seen before. And so it was a little bit heartbreaking. Obviously that was like the stag that was sort of holding that area, likely that the farmer had seen. There's not like heaps of deer. And I think the thing too was then he went and like, I was like, okay, well, he's by himself now, but there should be some hinds in this fresh pick. And, I end up spotting them. I think there was only a couple of hinds, 2 or 3. And he actually went up and joined them. And I was like, okay, well, the chance is, so the sad thing was that it was like, it's likely that there's not like another mature stag in this area. And I think like one thing that we really pride ourselves on is getting cool footage and video and stuff. And one thing Dad actually picked up, because I was showing him some footage that I'd taken on the 26th of March, where we'd actually seen him the afternoon before, a couple of Ks off, and be like, oh, there's one antler stag. And then on the 26th, we actually hind called him in to like 25 meters, and he probably would have come in like closer. We just like we saw him at like 80, and we're like, oh, there's one antler stag. We'll sort of stop hind calling him, let him like move his way in. And he was at 25 meters up on this like rock silhouetted and did some like roaring and stuff, which was sick. But at that time, like Dad noted that he was like really fat, really shiny, had no scars, like notable scars on him. And he actually had a brow tine, like he'd snapped off his main beam, but he had a brow tine. Whereas to be honest, when we saw him today, which is like the 22nd of April, he looked like dog shit. Like he looked like he'd been on like a 3-day hell of a bender. Cause he looked like really gray in the coat. Like he had a heap of scars on him. He'd actually like snapped off that brow tine, which shows that even, with one antler missing, he was still keen and still fighting. But obviously the other stag presumably had 2 antlers, and he was sort of able to do the old reach around and rake him, across the back and stuff. And so he had a heap of scars on him, not to the point that he was like, there was visible blood coming out and stuff, but to the point that there was definitely hair missing and stuff that you could see, which was, just, I don't know, sort of cool just seeing that natural behavior and piecing it all together.
See the unseen with Leopold Optics. Built for those who demand precision, durability, and clarity, Leopold Optics deliver relentless performance in the field. trusted by hunters, shooters, and professionals worldwide. I'm currently running the BX4 Range HD 10x42 binoculars. Being able to spot game and then range them without changing between binoculars and rangefinder has been so convenient when hunting and guiding. It allows me to keep a clear field of view on the subject and then accurately read the distance to my clients in real time in the lead up to a shot. For binoculars, rangefinders, spotting scopes, or anything Leopold Optics related, be sure to check out Venture Hunting and Outdoors. The team at Venture stock the full range on their website and have many in store at their Brisbane megastore for you to check out today.
Do you think, I mean, we don't know about the behaviours or the mental capacity of these deer, but do you think, like with antler size, this guy next year, if he grows the other antler, which I think he will, but it's snapped off, he's going to be next level? And for those people who have had on Instagram have seen James's red deer stag this year, coincidentally we're boiling out the skull now, but this guy's a cracker and will probably be up there. But do you think he's like, hey, I'm a big boy, but even though he's got the one antler, thinks that he can still take on other stags with two? Like, he has to be, because obviously he's got the evidence, and he's still trying to service hinds, and he's still trying to... The only thing is that he's away from the main feed, and I guess post-rut, that's what they want, and he's probably not in the action with all the... There is feed where he was, but he was on blackberries, and he was doing other stuff, whereas I guess he's miles and miles and miles away from a crop, let's say, or a feed, or an area that's got good... Yeah.
Yeah, the farmer had tried sowing down some oats, I believe, and they obviously didn't take, and then he got like a little bit of rain, which was, well, they took and then died because they didn't get follow-up rain, and then he ended up getting like 15 mil of rain. So whatever seed was still left in the ground is now sprung up, and the deer are just smashing it.
But it's so dry. He's hand feeding everything.
Yeah,
I mean, not you know, but you're a vet. What he's giving him oats, or what is?
Oh, he's just giving him like cereal, hay. Yeah. So he's feeding everything, which was pretty cool to see. A bit of.
I know where you're getting to now. You talking about the cat?
Yeah. So we this morning, like after seeing that one antler stag and sort of piecing that all together, and realizing that he was like, it was an area which was sort of lower density for red deer, but normally does hold a good stag. And the fact that he was there, we'd seen the hinds, there was no other mature stag in the area, made me think, okay, well, let's try and double back to the car quickly and go and check out the area where Dad had been the day before.
Hold on, call it as you said, we've got 5% chance of finding the deer. They're probably bedded at this point. That's all I give you. And I said, I'll take that odds. But on the way out, we had about a K&a-half hike to the car. And what happened?
And we were walking back, and I looked at where these big grain feeders are, feeding all the weaners, and there was like 100 weaners around this thing, and I just noticed two like doing this weird, like kicking up dust and trotting, and I was like, what are they doing? And I looked down at their feet, and here's this like pretty solid tabby cat, and what it was actually doing was it was almost using the cattle as like, I don't know, like a cross mirage camouflage, where normally if you see like a cat stalking something, it's like down on its haunches and it's like rolling its shoulders, it's like belly's like on the ground, and it's like, take a couple of steps, stop, take a couple of steps, stop, like, super streamlined. This thing was like just trotting, like just imagine like a dog trotting on a walk towards, because they're feeding like hay and stuff, like all the galahs and ducks and doves and everything are around these feeders. Pigs we saw at first light, like a couple of little suckers that I'll go and shoot and eat shortly. But the thing was, this cat was like, stalking amongst the cattle and pretty much just trotting amongst the cattle. And the cattle were like, there was two weaners in particular, like chasing the cat to the point that the cat stopped at one stage, and I saw the weaner stand on the cat's tail, and the cat's like turned around, it's like trying to bite the weaner and stuff, and then eventually like stood off, and it like did this big jump, like it's like someone's holding a cat's tail, and then all of a sudden it like springs out of the grasp or the reach. And anyway, nearly got this galah and nearly got a couple other things, and I just said to Dad, I said the chance that we get this cat's almost zero, like sort of the pigs, because as soon as the weaners see us, you've got like 150 weaners stampeding off. Oh, that's right. And like you just lose the cat and the pigs in amongst all the weaners, and then like they don't stop, they just keep going, which is inevitably what happened. This cat just took off and ended up in this blackberry bush, but it was still really cool to see, and something pretty different. Like, yeah, just, I don't know, it was like very, very
Mother
unique.
Nature at its best, yeah. See, and they're the little takeaways. You look at that and you think, how amazing that is that, you know, when you see things like that.
So yeah, like Dad had said, after we had seen the cat, I just said, let's go back to where we were yesterday, and we'll have like a quick look, or where you were yesterday and had your stalk. We'll have a quick look and try and find this stag. And so we drove,
Not this stag, Lucky 7.
Lucky 7. Well, to be honest, I just knew there was going to be a couple of hinds on that feed still, and I didn't know it was going to be Lucky 7, but I just was like, there should be a stag with them, sort of thing. Like, they're in a pretty hot spot. And we ended up driving around in about half an hour, and like right where I wanted to pull up, or just as we were about to pull up, Dad actually saw on a ridge about 500 metres away. He's like, oh, there's the deer. And we could see that there was a stag with them, and I was like, okay, sick. And yeah, we drove a couple of 100 metres, parked the car, got out, and it was one of these stalks where, you know, it was like an all or nothing, in the sense that normally they walk back from this feeding area, like further into the place that we have access to. On this particular day, they were, and maybe it was just due to pressure and, you know, changing the habits or something like that from Dad the day before, they were actually feeding the opposite, like going the opposite direction, which leads straight to the boundary fence. So when we saw them, they were across the gully from us, and
They were quite high, weren't they?
well, they were, just say from the gully to the boundary fence is about 300 metres, and they were already 100 metres up, right? So by the time we got out of the car and like ran back to them, we were pretty much in the open. And that's where I just said to Dad, like, you know, we've got to try and get there, or these deer are going to be over the fence.
It's all or nothing, you said.
Yeah.
And you just said, follow me, hold on to the camera, we're going.
Pretty well. I just said, just stay behind me and hold this so I can glass, like steadily, because I was trying to line up trees and stuff. And we were pretty much trotting like straight down the ridge, lining up trees and stuff. They were sort of feeding arse on away from us, which was like pretty cool. And knew they weren't going to be looking around too much. It was super blowy, like it was probably 10 knots, with gusts up to maybe 15, 20 knots. So we had like a fair bit of sort of cross movement protection from like limbs and stuff like that. And even like where they were, there was a lot of brush and boulders and stuff. So I knew that even if they got like half a look at two big stooges running across the open paddock, like we would have enough cover that where they'd seen us, we would then be somewhere else in 10 or 15 metres. And so we were able to cover the distance really quickly, which was cool. And I ended up, like, we got down in the gully, you know, used that topography to get up and started moving up on these deer. And when we were about 100 metres out of the gully, I looked up, and we were probably 50 metres out of the gully. And I looked up, and about 200 metres out of the gully where they were, I actually saw the stag. And that's where I'm like, oh yeah, it's Lucky 7. And he's like, yep, sick, I'll definitely, you know, like happily take him. He's a cracking stag. And we went up towards where they were. And what actually happened, I like looked at him, and
he
like,
almost popped over that sort of ridge line out of sight, and he went between two boulders, and you said to me, I've lost sight of him. And then we had all the hinds virtually in front of us.
Yeah, originally we popped up in a straight line, like we had pretty good cover, but we popped up and I just realised that between, like I could see all the hinds milling around at like 100, but I'm like, where we need to get to if we're going to stalk, like if they're going to bed and we're going to stalk in, we need to change our line and angle of approach. So I'm like, drop back. So we drop back down, use the slope of the hill and a few rocks and stuff. And we only slid around like
25?
I was going to say 30 metres to our right sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it changed the complete approach. We had like a heap more boulders, heap more cover. And it was like, if they do bed there, Dad would be able to like, pick his way through the boulders.
I ranged one boulder at 30 metres tops.
Oh, for sure. That was like in front of us. But the point was like, we were then only 100 metres off the deer with a heap of cover in a good line. So if there was like an opportunity where the stag came down, you know, we could sort of get in there.
But you did say, just to elaborate on the story, the hinds were right in front of us feeding, and you said to me, I wouldn't be surprised if this hind comes down, this lead hind comes down, brings it back to this, because you said something about...
Have you ever tried applying for tags in the States? Then you already know the pain. Different states, different draw systems, deadlines all over the place, point schemes that don't make no sense, and half the websites don't even like international credit cards or our addresses, which is why Aiden and I rely on Huntingful. These guys live and breathe the US draw system. They break down every state, every species, every tag option, and lay it out so hunters can finally make sense of it. Whether you're chasing elk in Colorado, mule deer in Wyoming, or whitetails back east, they'll tell you where to apply, what your real odds are, and how to build points without wasting time or money. Additionally, they create a hunt strategy that infinitely increases your chance of success. Our success in the US would be nothing like it is without the help of the Huntingful team. So if you're looking to turn that bucket list US hunt into a real plan, then join Huntingful. Use code TWINELEMENTS when you sign up to get 25% off your first year's Huntingful application fees. Let the Huntingful team guide you through the chaos. Sorry about that. We've just had all kinds of interruptions. We've had this SD card that was filling up ran out of card space because it said it had 2.5 hours left. And I'm obviously used to doing solo podcasts, so I didn't realize that having 2 tracks, as in Dad and I running, it ran out 2 hours, 15 minutes, and I noticed. And so if we've repeated ourselves before, it's because we've lost 10 minutes of 10 minutes of audio, and then we've gone back and re-recorded it. And then just then the podcasting recording unit just ran out of battery. So whilst we're halfway through that final story. So here we are again, re-recording. But yeah, the reason why, I think it was Dad was saying that, there was a hind, so there was 2 hinds, 2 yearlings and a spiker. And I said to Dad, we can't move here. It was open. We couldn't see the stag. So I'm like, the stag is above where they were. I said, all we can hope for is that they're feeding around up there, and then they will drop back down below the level of the boulders and bed, because they were on a west face, and they were on the west side of the boulders, and it was a really fierce easterly coming. So they were out of the wind. Even though the boulders were only, a meter and a half, they're quite big. If they bedded down or even standing, the wind was going straight over the top of them with the slope of the hill and everything like that. So they were there pretty comfortable just feeding around. And that's where the hind just took a couple of steps our way and then was looking around. And that's where I just said to Dad, even going back to people that are very good at hunting have this hunting instinct. Well, I shouldn't say people that are very good at hunting, people that hunt a lot, because I wouldn't necessarily say I'm very good at hunting. You pick up this hunting instinct where it's you just know.
Well, behavioural, really.
Yeah, behaviour. And it was very apparent in Dad, who probably doesn't hunt as much, where, this lead hind started coming our way, and she was looking around because it was so windy. Obviously, it being a prey animal, they can't hear. We could have done anything. We were just talking at 100, and there was no way they were going to hear us or whatever. Because there's so much movement from the wind, they can't hear anything. So they rely on their eyesight a lot, which makes them super jumpy, and they look around a lot. And anytime this hind would look our direction, Dad
panicked. Yeah.
Dad would oh, she's seen us. And I'm she hasn't seen us. Just relax. And she's oh, she's looking. And they were just throwing, all of them were just throwing their heads around heaps.
But hold on, I had the binoculars on her and you had the camera on her, and I'm looking at her and I can see her ears and her eyes fixated in our direction, and you were saying she's doing what they do because it's so windy they're relying on their eyes. And because she was a lead hind too, she kept, and the fact that she kept on coming closer and closer, I thought, she's going to see us. But he said, no, we had enough cover. And I was surprised how close she got. She just made her way down.
Yeah, and I think it's just one of these things that people just, it's probably a lack of experience. And I see it a lot when I take new hunters or guide people and stuff, where people are very unconfident in their camouflage clothing. They're unconfident in their setup and how they present themselves, in the sense that if a deer looks in their direction, and I think it just comes from previous experience, if a deer is looking in their direction, it must be looking at them. Whereas we've had Aiden and I, especially with the chital deer and stuff, we've had deer where you're at 14 feet, No, where you're actually probably at 14 meters. Dad doesn't know that unit of measurement,
Yes,
meters.
I do.
But yeah, you're at 14 meters, and like you'll have chital deer that are like feeding and like look up, and they just look straight through you or past you, and it happens like all the time. And it happens with reds, it happens with fallow. And don't get me wrong, like when they get really close, like they'll pick you out. Like, what the hell is that? But that's where if you're like standing still, they'll just like, yeah, normally they'll sort of figure it out and be like, okay, what's that? And they'll sort of move off.
You don't even wear a face mask. I do.
Oh, I never wear a face mask. I think they're the most ridiculous thing because I've seen so many people, face masks piss me off so much because people put a face mask on and instantly feel like they've got some invisibility cloak.
But what do you think about shiny face? And
Heaps of stuff.
Yeah, but there's times where you're walking in and you think that you've got a glare on your skin, and I reckon that absolutely. I feel more confident with a face mask.
The thing is, but the thing that you wearing a face mask, maybe you can't hear how loud you are.
No, I don't cover my ears. Just
Well,
cover my nose.
Maybe you should be more conscious of how loud you are. Because the thing is, like, I'm not disagreeing. Like, so when I can see my cameras reflecting, like the screens off my cameras. If I'm walking first thing in the morning, if it's an easterly and I'm walking from the west to the east, my camera's lenses reflect the light like no tomorrow, right? But the thing is, with your face and your hands and everything like that being covered, like, it's all about how you move through the bush
And when.
Like that's the big thing that people don't do. Like, they put a face mask on and they're like, oh, I'm invisible now. And it's like, yeah, but okay, so you put a face mask on, so
you're waving your
so
hands.
there's 5%, you're 5% more natural colored, right? But then you just, like, the deer are half looking your way and you walk, or you walk too fast.
Of course, it's
or
just common
you're
sense
too
prevails.
noisy. So
Yeah.
it's like, and that's where like people stress about face masks. And I'm like, I haven't worn a face mask now for like probably 5 years. You know what I mean? And that's like in most environments, because the other thing that I find, and not that it changes much, is like I used to shoot with a bow and practice with a face mask, and then I stopped doing it. And then I remember one day I went to shoot and it was all bunched up under like my jawline, and I flunked the shot. And I honestly think it was because my anchoring point was different because I had the face mask on. And so because of that, I just stopped wearing them, because it was like, okay, it's like, I think that, yeah, I get hot, I get sweaty, I get pissed off, I move too fast. I can't hear how loud I'm being. And so I don't wear them because I think people fixate on the fact, and like, yes, it's like that little 1%er, but for me, it's like a 1%er that then like affects other little 1%ers, like how you actually sneakily move through the bush or whatever, or how, like, do you notice that you broke that stick and you think it's not that loud, but really it's really loud. And then they're looking your way and you go and take another step because you're wearing a face mask and you're thinking you get away from it. And they see, instead of just your little face shine move, they see your whole body move. And then they're like, okay, well, there's some bloke there. And then they're gone. But yeah, with this hind, getting a bit off track, but with his hind today, Dad was like, oh, she's looking. And I'm like, just relax.
This is the same hind that busted me twice earlier, so I was pretty paranoid.
Presumably the same hind. Like, there's...
Well, no, I was watching her from the day before, and I got, she was a bigger...
It's the same hind?
Well, she was a bigger hind. She had a little bit of a grey flick. All the rest were younger.
Yeah, but what about the other two hinds that left with Lucky 7 that you didn't see?
I didn't see them, but they didn't bust me.
So how do you know it's the same hind, though?
Oh, I don't know. This one.
Anyway, there was a mature hind that had seen Dad. And he'd been busted by heaps of mature hinds because Dad wears a face mask and he moves too fast or moves at the wrong time. But the point is, like, Dad was also not comfortable and didn't understand the concept that deer will just look, if you break up, they'll look in your direction naturally. And just because they're looking in your direction doesn't mean they've got eyes on you. But the reason why, I thought they were going to bed there. And then she took a couple of steps and I was like, okay, she's starting to get more into the wind, which tells me that unless she's going to walk back, she'll come, like, start moving down to us, because we were in like the next sort of little bit of cover. And she took some steps, and then eventually she was pretty much walking towards us, really. And I just said,
I'm telling you, she was probably at 15 meters. You've got the video footage.
Yeah, but that's fine. But the reason she picked us out because...
And she's there.
Yeah, but I told you at 80 that she was coming.
Yeah, you said, I think, that's what I know. When we first saw her and we lost the stag, you said these guys are going to bed down where they are, or that lead hind is going to make her way down to us. And that's when I was panicking because she was walking down towards. So I thought she was doing that Samba thing where they walk down and stomp and they come closer and stomp. But she didn't do any of that. But I thought, she's looking. Has she busted us? Her ears are focused on us. And you go, relax. She's not doing anything. And we was talking because it was so blowy, just wool, mind you, wool side by side. And she come all the way down. I reckon she wanted a bed just where we were.
Oh, probably. But the thing for that, which hopefully Dad learnt, was yes. So she picked us out and kept walking though. And if I had a bow there, you had a bow there, but if we wanted to shoot her, we could have easily shot her. She walked, like Dad said, she would have walked past it 15 meters.
Broadside.
Came around from, front on almost to quartering on to pretty well broadside.
Yeah.
But the point is I was moving.
With the camera.
Shifting from front on as well to quartering on to broadside. So I've done slowly, but I've done an arc, a 90-degree arc, moving with a big shiny camera as well. So she could see us, but she was like, "What are you?"
That's right.
And that's the point. If your movements are concealed and slow and everything like that, and then eventually she got behind us, winded us, and took off. And then I just said to Dad, put an arrow on the string. We've got to run up here because I'm hoping this stag is on the bench and above, right on the boundary line. And we got up there and the stag was gone, sadly.
I reckon he was gone from the start. I reckon he
was.
Yeah, I reckon he's taken the hinds up further up what you said, and the next property.
Yeah, well, because we sat off those hinds for 10 or 12 minutes. And so by the time that we'd got to, by the time we'd watched those hinds, she'd walked down, smelt us, took off. The other hinds had taken off.
But how quickly do they disappear? How long did it take us to make that distance? 50 metres, whatever, 60 metres. Yeah, and we got up there and we just jumped around, looked every which way, could not see him. Every which way.
And that is, one of the features of red deer, I just find they're very elk-like in that situation where they'll sit on something and feed and feed and feed, but when they want to move, they'll move. And it's not they're not like fallow deer where they'll feed somewhere and then they'll generally bed pretty close to a feeding area. It's nothing for them to be feeding on a crop or feeding somewhere and then move 2K away to a bedding area or whatever and then come back out, that afternoon and do the same thing. So that was the end of the hunt. It was a pretty cool, I didn't get to spend nearly as much time as I would have with Dad, and it would have been cool to spend a bit more and try and help him get his red stag and complete the slam, but just means he's got to come back.
I think we got to see, or I got to see 3 really cool deer up close. 4 if you include the young Doumtsis, where it was bedding in the teeter. I got to, like I said, 20 metres, 15 metres, I can't remember, but very close. But yeah, it was an awesome solo / couple of days with you, which was good, or a couple of mornings. And I think in that time I learned a lot because I think last year's hunt was a little bit different. The weather conditions were terrible and we did a lot of, let's go and find them on crop because they're starving, post-rut, they're hungry. But we found them miles off, and a lot of times they were on different properties we couldn't get onto. This time you sort of patent them a little bit, sort of you go, look, they're going to come out from here, they'll be there, end up, it's an easterly today. And that's the other thing, first 2 days was westerlies, I hunted differently, and the rest was easterly, so it just changed a little bit. But no, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I think that's why it makes the Grand Slam a little bit more interesting.
A good backpack turns hard country into possible country. When the terrain gets serious, your pack becomes the only thing you can't afford to get wrong. That's why we use and believe in Eberlestock. Eberlestock has been making backpacks for 40 years and is trusted by tens of thousands of hunters and hikers worldwide. Their customizable packs and bino harnesses show exquisite attention to detail and years of refinement to make the ultimate backpack range. We use the Vapor 2500 for our day hunts and Vapor 5000 for our backpack hunts. If you're in the market for a new pack or bino harness, check out Venture Hunting and Outdoors in-store or online to see the full range of Eberlestock gear. You won't be disappointed. Well, team, thank you for tuning in to another Twin Elements podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed that one. Learned a few tips and tactics from the old boy, and enjoyed his stories that he shared there on the hog deer. We're now just going to jump into our usual FAQ, frequently asked questions section. If you guys have a question you'd like to answer on the podcast, please email us at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, or send us a message on Instagram at Twin Elements, James Doumtsis Outdoors, or Aidan Doumtsis Outdoors, and we will answer it on there, but also feature it on the podcast here just for that general community census and, trying to educate the masses to hopefully help you guys be more successful out in the field and hopefully get amongst a few more critters. So this question today has come in from Jacob Curran. What effect does the moon phase have on hunting? So to be honest, it's one we've had a fair bit on the podcast, and it's definitely a factor that takes, like a lot of people obviously at the moment, with the rut being such a topical time, probably looking to moon phases and that type of thing more, and sort of pair moon phase with activity. And it's something I definitely consider, but in general, it's like pretty low down. Like I'm going to care more about sort of temperature, wind direction, and like how windy it actually is. All those type of things way more than I'm going to look into the moon phase for the day and hence sort of pick and expect what sort of activity. Because the thing is, like, all you've got to do with it, whether it be the bow or the rifle, like you may only hear one roar for the day or one croak for the day, and it's a full moon. But if that one croak or one roar for the day is, the stag or the buck that you're chasing, and it just sets you in the right direction, and then you end up shooting him, well, yes, it's like less than 10 or 10 bucks croaking or a couple of stags roaring, but it's like it still gave you the indication that you needed. And so for us, like we just hunt like all the time, like, and it's nothing that we really take into account too heavily, like we've said. So like one of the main things that we have noted is, though, with moon phase, obviously they've got like improved visibility. And as we've said before on the podcast, like they can see already exceptionally well at night. Like if you're walking around in the dark and it's a full moon, like you can see pretty well. They've got heaps more rods in their eyes, which is the part that actually detects and helps you see in the dark. So they've got, like, being a prey animal, they've got so many more than us. And so they can see brilliantly in the dark. When it's full moon, they can see pretty much like just treat it like they can see during the day. So if it's the rut, they're still going to be rutting quite hard. So, or really hard in the dark. Whereas if it's not a full moon and there's no moon or a new moon, that's where, like it makes it a bit harder for them to, they got to rely more on probably scent, that type of thing, to actually find does and, rut and carry on and find hinds and that type of thing in the dark, rather than being able to see them and then go and pursue them. So one thing we do note is sometimes the mornings can be a bit quieter because they've been rutting all night, roaring, croaking, running around, carrying on, doing all those rutting behaviors. The stags and the bucks are absolutely spent. So first light comes around, and normally you do get a little bit of activity at first light, but they normally shut down a lot earlier. What we've seen, though, because of that, is just say it's getting light at, 5:30, they might croak and rut till only 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then they shut down. But what we do find is they normally have like a bit of a midday blep where there will be like a spark in activity somewhere between sort of like 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And they often do start up earlier in the afternoons, where you might see, instead of them, where they'd normally croak, if you hunt like the whole rut, they might croak from 5 till 6. Well, they're actually starting at 4:30. But to be honest, like there's no hard and fast rules on this. This is just our observations. And like I'm going to be out there regardless, from an hour before first light all the way till probably 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. I'm going to go back, have a feed, rest up for an hour or two, and then I'm going to be back on the mountain, probably glassing, trying to find stags or trying to find bucks well before they're making noise. And if one is croaking at 2 o'clock or roaring at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, well, that's a blessing, but it's not what I'm relying on to go and try and find these deer a lot of the time. So, that would be my answer for that. But I mean, definitely something we take into account. But like we said a couple of times on here, it's not like at the front of our mind. I'm definitely not like every morning and afternoon and stuff. Like I'm checking wind direction, how many knots, I'm checking weather, temperature, looking through the day, like cloud cover, like all that type of stuff to try and predict activity, try and predict animal movements, behavior, where they're going to be bedding up, where they're going to be moving through, all that type of stuff. And sure, I'll like look at wind direction every now and again. Sure, I'll look at moon phase every now and again, but it's certainly not something that I have at the forefront of my to check list to predetermine activity for the day. So hunt hard, and hopefully, Jacob, you can full moon or no full moon, you can get amongst a bit of rutting activity and be successful this rut. So this next question comes in from Liam Biding. Hey mate, new to bow hunting and just wondering what length stabilizer you and your brother use. So Aiden and I both use the option quiverizer. I don't know how long mine specifically is, but what I've done is, because I shoot like a 29-inch arrow, I've actually pretty much got it pulled out as far as I can. So if you shoot like a shorter arrow, you can sort of move it in, but I don't want the arrow sticking out the back too far. So I've got it moved out quite far in front. And I've just found that really works stabilization wise for how it feels in my hand. And I just love that, like the stabilizer, I guess, or the quiverizer, because you can use it on your shoulders to enable you to be able to glass, with two hands, which we use our optics bread and butter all the time. So we have that above us on our shoulders, and then we have our camera clipped onto our belt, and then that just means that we've got our hands to glass, we can move around, and yes, it is a bit bulky hanging out the side, but the quiverizer enables us to be able to sort of transport our bows, and I think honestly it makes us more successful because we just spot game naturally so much easier and so much further away. We get more opportunities from being able to glass with two hands than one. So super versatile piece of kit there, mate. And Liam, if you're in the market for a new stabilizer, I'd probably be checking out the quiverizers would be my recommendation. But yeah, that wraps up to today's podcast, guys. Hopefully you're all aware that on our YouTube channel, we're dropping an episode every single week for you guys to view. Hopefully you diehard fans that listen to the podcast already well aware of that. And what we're about to kick off and start this week is up at Cayuga Adventures with Matty Moore and Brad Smith. So we went up there actually with Dad at the end of November, had an epic couple of days up there where Aiden and I were able to capitalize on some super handy boars, and actually were able to return the favor and film Matty Moore and Brad Smith on a hunt with them. So if you're in the market to actually go and hunt some boars in the Cape, this is the last year I believe that they're going to be up there at Strathburn Station running these Cayuga Adventures. So get in contact with them ASAP. And if you haven't heard from the podcast already, and hopefully we'll see from the footage, it's absolutely mental up there. It's going to be a fantastic time, whether you're super experienced or whether you're just getting into bow hunting. You'll learn heaps and you'll have plenty of opportunities at really toothy boars. So make sure to jump onto the YouTube channel, check out that, get inspired, have an absolute froth of a time. But every Wednesday, 6 p.m, we're on the Twin Helmets YouTube channel. We are dropping a video for you guys to watch. So make sure to check out there. As usual, we've got our podcast that drops every Monday. So please make sure to check that out. We're also trying to increase the community, and we've started memberships on YouTube. So we're going to be doing discount codes on certain brands. We're going to be doing like live Q&A chat forums for members. We're also going to have exclusive content like knowledge-based stuff that we'll put up on the YouTube channel. Just secret tips and tricks like calling in reds, like all the calls that we use, rattling in bucks, like all that type of stuff. We're going to be making up videos for you guys to learn off, as well as like a chat forum as well, where you can directly contact us all the time and we'll answer your questions. So if you're out there hunting and stuff and you've got something, that happened, or, you want questions, then, if you're a YouTube member, you'll have access to us to sort of break down your hunt and hopefully help you learn and help you be more successful in your next hunt. So for the cost of a coffee, you can get all that and much, much more. So go and check out all the different options for the memberships on YouTube. We also want to get to 25k subs in the next month. We're not that far off. We're nearly there. So make sure if you're not subscribed, but you do follow along every week and watch the videos, please subscribe. On a side note, we have pretty much wrapped up all of the Rut podcast now. So we've got a couple of podcasts that we're going to do in the next couple of weeks that we've already got topics for. But if there's any specific topics that you guys want to hear, whether it's, talking about gear reviews, talking about, backpack hunts, talking about, like hunting more in the US, applications, talking about hunting up in the Northern Territory for buffalo, bantang, pigs, all that type of stuff, how we go about a property again. Like if there's any topics you want us to review, please let us know. Send us a message on the Twin Elements account, James Doumtsis Outdoors or Aiden Doumtsis Outdoors account, or send us an email with the subject line podcast topic to info@twinelements.com.au, and we'll make sure to do a podcast on it in the future, because really we just want to have this platform to sort of service you guys and help you guys get as much knowledge as you can, and hopefully help you guys be more successful out in the field. So thank you once again for chiming in to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, and we'll catch you next week.